Imagine the most powerful man in the free world, the President of the United States, a man of duty, of unwavering public image. Now, imagine him falling in love, not with a diplomat, not with a senator, but with his wife's makeup artist. A woman of breathtaking beauty, with a past as vibrant and complex as the colors she blends. But this isn't just a love story. This is a tale of forbidden desire, of a secret so profound it could shatter a presidency, ignite a nation, and redefine what it means to be seen. What if the woman who held the president's heart also held a truth that could bring down the White House? Stay with us, because the color of secrets is about to be revealed. If you're ready to dive into this incredible story, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and make sure you turn on notifications so you don't miss a single chapter of The Color of Secrets. Let's begin. The air in the East Wing of the White House hums with a peculiar blend of history and hurried efficiency. Polished marble floors reflect the soft glow of antique chandeliers, and the hushed footsteps of aides echo through corridors where monumental decisions are made daily. It was into this world, a world of rigid protocol and unspoken rules, that Valentina Reyes stepped. At 31, Valentina was a vision. Her Colombian heritage imbued her with a natural grace, a vibrant spirit that seemed almost out of place amidst the staid elegance of the White House. Her eyes, the color of rich coffee, held a depth that spoke of a life lived with both passion and quiet resilience. Her hands, nimble and artistic, were her tools, capable of transforming a face with a mere whisper of a brushstroke. She was, quite simply, stunningly beautiful, and she carried her story, whatever it might be, with an undeniable, dignified poise. She was the newest, and arguably the most intriguing addition to First Lady Diana Calloway's image team. President James Calloway, a man whose life was a meticulously crafted public narrative, was a figure of immense power and carefully managed composure. At 52, he was a widower who had ascended to the highest office, rebuilding his image as the family values president after the tragic loss of his first wife. He was disciplined, composed, a moderate Republican whose every public utterance was weighed, measured, and analyzed. Yet beneath the polished smile, the practiced handshake, and the unwavering gaze lay a deep, almost cavernous loneliness. A loneliness that the trappings of power, the endless meetings, and the constant demands of the presidency could not fill. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that bled into another with the monotonous rhythm of official duties. President Calloway was making his way from a meeting in the cabinet room, heading towards the Oval Office. His mind was preoccupied with the latest legislative push, the delicate dance of bipartisan negotiations. He walked with the familiar, purposeful stride of a man accustomed to leading, his Secret Service detail a silent, watchful shadow. As he rounded a corner in the East Wing, a corridor less frequented by the president himself, his gaze, usually fixed forward, flickered. There, standing by a large, ornate mirror, was Valentina. She was adjusting a small silver case, her head tilted slightly, a stray strand of dark hair falling across her cheek. The late afternoon sun, filtering through a tall, arched window, caught the subtle gold flecks in her hair, illuminating her profile with an almost ethereal glow. Their eyes met. It was a fleeting moment, perhaps no more than a second, yet it stretched, suspended in the hushed air of the White House. Her gaze was direct, curious, devoid of the usual deference or awe he encountered. His, usually guarded, held a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, a spark of unexpected recognition, a jolt of pure, unadulterated human interest. No words were exchanged. His detail moved him forward, their presence a gentle but firm reminder of his station. Valentina offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of quiet acknowledgement, and then turned back to her case. The moment passed. The president continued his walk, his thoughts no longer solely on legislation. Something had shifted. A tiny, almost imperceptible crack had appeared in the carefully constructed facade of his presidential existence. The air, once merely efficient, now carried a faint, lingering scent of jasmine, a fragrance he couldn't quite place, but one that would, from that day forward, subtly permeate the hallowed halls of his memory. The White House, a fortress of power, had just become the unwitting stage for a story neither of them could have predicted. After that first, fleeting encounter, an almost imperceptible change began to ripple through President Calloway's routine. He found himself, quite uncharacteristically, taking detours. The East Wing, once a path of necessity, became a route of quiet, unspoken anticipation. He'd find reasons to pass through, a quick word with an aide, a glance into a room, hoping for another glimpse of the woman who had so unexpectedly captured his attention. It was a subtle game, one played entirely within the confines of his own mind, yet it added an unexpected tremor to his otherwise predictable days. One crisp autumn evening, the White House was quieter than usual. First Lady Diana Calloway was attending a high-profile diplomatic dinner, a meticulously choreographed event designed to bolster international relations. The president, having concluded a series of late-night calls, found himself with a rare moment of solitude. He was restless, the silence of the Oval Office amplifying the quiet hum of his own thoughts. He decided to take a walk. His footsteps echoed softly on the marble, his Secret Service detail a respectful distance behind. As he approached the First Lady's private quarters in the East Wing, he noticed a light still on. Through the slightly ajar door of the makeup studio, he saw her. Valentina. She was meticulously organizing brushes, her brow furrowed in concentration, preparing for the next day's demanding schedule. She often stayed late, a testament to her dedication and the meticulous nature of her craft. He hesitated for a moment, then, against every instinct of presidential protocol, he knocked softly on the open doorframe. Valentina looked up, startled, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized him. She quickly composed herself, a polite, professional smile gracing her lips. "Mr. President," she said, her voice soft, with a melodic lilt that hinted at her Colombian roots. "Valentina," he replied, the sound of her name feeling surprisingly natural on his tongue. He stepped inside, the scent of cosmetics and something subtly floral filling the air. "Still working late?" "Always something to prepare for, sir," she responded, gesturing vaguely to the array of palettes and tools. "The First Lady has a busy week." He nodded, then found himself saying, "It can be a lonely place, this house, even when it's full of people." She paused, her gaze meeting his, and for the first time the professional veneer seemed to thin. "I imagine so, Mr. President. Loneliness has many forms. Even in a city of millions, one can feel quite alone." He leaned against a counter, a gesture far more casual than his usual demeanor. "Tell me, Valentina, where are you from in Colombia?" Her eyes softened further. "Bogotá, a city of mountains and rain and 1,000 stories. I miss the smell of the rain there, the way it cleanses everything." "You came here for opportunity?" he asked, genuinely curious. She gave a small, wistful smile. "For opportunity, yes, but also for something more. To build a life that was truly mine, to be seen." She caught herself, a flicker of something guarded returning to her eyes. "It is a beautiful country, America, full of possibilities." He found himself drawn into her words, into the quiet strength that radiated from her. "You know," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "sometimes I feel like I'm always performing, always the president, always the widower, always the leader. It's rare to just be." Valentina looked at him, her gaze surprisingly direct, understanding. "Perhaps that is why we are drawn to art, Mr. President, to create something real, even if it is just for a moment, to show a different face to the world, or perhaps to reveal the true one." They talked for what felt like minutes but was closer to an hour, not about policy, not about politics, but about life, about the weight of expectations, about the masks people wear, about the quiet yearning for connection. He spoke of the immense pressure, the constant scrutiny, the way the office consumed every part of him. She spoke of her journey, of leaving everything behind, of the courage it took to forge a new path, to embrace her authentic self in a world that often resisted it. In that small, brightly lit room, surrounded by brushes and powders, two lonely souls, one the most powerful man in the world, the other a woman who had fought for every inch of her existence, found a fragile, unexpected common ground. They talked until the Secret Service agent outside discreetly cleared his throat, a gentle reminder of the hour and of the world waiting beyond the door. As James Calloway left the East Wing that night, the weight on his shoulders felt for the first time in years a little lighter. He had truly talked, and he had truly been seen. The White House is a place where secrets are currency, and observation is a finely honed art. First Lady Diana Calloway, a woman whose political instincts were as sharp as her perfectly tailored suits, was a master of this art. She had built her life around image, around the careful cultivation of power, and she noticed everything. She noticed the subtle shift in James's routine, the casual detours through the East Wing, the way his gaze lingered a fraction of a second longer when Valentina was in the room. She saw the quiet, almost imperceptible softening around his eyes when he spoke of the new makeup artist. Diana said nothing, of course. Her power lay in her silence, in her ability to watch, to gather information, to let others reveal themselves before she made her move. But she watched everything, every glance, every hushed conversation, every deviation from the president's meticulously planned schedule. A cold, calculating certainty began to settle in her mind. Meanwhile, James, unaccustomed to such raw, unguarded emotion, found himself seeking counsel, not from his political advisors, not from his chief of staff, but from the one man who had seen him at his most vulnerable, his most human. Agent Marcus Webb. Marcus, a seasoned Secret Service veteran, had been with James since his days as a senator. He was more than protection. He was a confidant, a silent observer of the president's private world. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of negotiations, James found Marcus waiting outside the Oval Office. "Marcus," James began, his voice low, "can we talk? Just for a moment." They walked the quiet corridors, the rhythmic crunch of their shoes on the carpet the only sound. "I haven't felt this alive in years, Marcus," James admitted, the words tumbling out, raw and unedited. Since before Sarah, there's a woman, Valentina." Marcus remained stoic, his expression unreadable, but his eyes held a flicker of concern. "Mr. President," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble, "you know the risks. The scrutiny, every move you make, every person you interact with is under a microscope, especially here, especially now." "I know the risks," James countered, a hint of frustration in his tone. "But this feels different. She sees me, Marcus, not the office, not the title, just me." "With all due respect, sir," Marcus replied, his loyalty unwavering but his honesty unyielding. "That's a dangerous sentiment in this house. Everyone has an agenda, everyone has a past. And everyone is a potential liability, especially for you." He paused, his gaze direct. "You are the president. Your personal life is not your own. It belongs to the nation and to your enemies." The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the gilded cage James inhabited. Marcus's warning was not a judgment, but a statement of undeniable fact. It was a tense conversation, filled with the unspoken weight of their long history, of Marcus's unwavering dedication to James's safety, both physical and political. James knew Marcus was right, and yet the feeling, The connection he felt with Valentina refused to be extinguished by logic or caution. While James wrestled with his conscience, Diana was already making her move. She summoned her chief of staff, Eleanor Vance, a woman as shrewd and ambitious as Diana herself. Eleanor entered the First Lady's private office, a room decorated with an austere elegance that mirrored Diana's own persona. "Eleanor," Diana began, her voice calm, almost conversational. "I've noticed a new face in the East Wing, Ms. Reyes. She seems quite talented." Eleanor, sensing the unspoken directive, nodded. "Indeed, First Lady, very professional." "Yes, professional," Diana echoed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "But one can never be too careful, can one? Especially with new staff in such sensitive positions. I'd like you to conduct a thorough background check on Ms. Reyes. Discretion, of course, is paramount. I want to know everything. Her history, her family, her journey to this country, every detail." Eleanor understood. There was no need for further explanation. "Consider it done, First Lady," she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. She knew what Diana was looking for. Not just a background check, but leverage, a weapon. In the cutthroat world of Washington, information was power, and Diana Calloway was about to arm herself. The stage was being set, not for a romance, but for a political battle, with Valentina Reyes unknowingly at its very center. The White House after midnight is a different entity altogether. The frenetic energy of the day recedes, replaced by a profound, almost sacred quiet. The security presence remains, a constant watchful hum, but the corridors are empty, the offices dark. It is in these stolen hours, when the world outside is asleep, that the true nature of the place and its inhabitants can sometimes reveal itself. One night, under the cloak of this profound stillness, President James Calloway invited Valentina for a private walk, not through the grand halls, but into the serene beauty of the rose garden. The air was cool, carrying the intoxicating scent of jasmine and the damp earth after a recent rain. The moon, a sliver of silver in the inky sky, cast long, dancing shadows from the meticulously pruned bushes. James, shedding the weight of his office for a precious few moments, felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. He walked beside Valentina, their footsteps barely disturbing the gravel path. The silence between them was not awkward, but comfortable, filled with an unspoken understanding. "This place," James began, his voice a low murmur, "it can feel like a gilded cage, beautiful but confining. Everyone here has an agenda, a role to play. It's rare to encounter someone who simply is." He turned to her, his eyes searching hers in the dim light. "You, Valentina, you are the most real person I have encountered in this place of illusions." Valentina looked up at him, and a genuine laugh, soft and melodious, escaped her lips. It wasn't the polite, polished laugh of a White House staffer. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy, a sound that seemed to ripple through the quiet garden. "Illusions, Mr. President. Perhaps, but even illusions can hold a certain truth, can't they? A reflection of what we wish to see or what we fear." He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Perhaps. But with you there are no illusions, just clarity." He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away. Her hand, warm and soft, settled into his, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had been growing between them. They continued to walk, hand in hand, the simple act a profound transgression in this house of power. The weight of the world, of their respective positions, seemed to recede, replaced by the quiet intimacy of the moment. The scent of jasmine, the soft moonlight, the shared silence. It was a scene lifted from a dream, fragile and fleeting. But then Valentina stopped. She gently withdrew her hand, her gaze fixed on the distant glow of the Washington Monument. Her expression, which had been so open, now held a shadow of something complex, something guarded. "James," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the use of his first name a stark intimacy in itself. "There are things about me you don't know." The words hung in the cool night air, heavy with unspoken meaning. James felt a jolt, a sudden awareness of the precipice they stood upon. He knew instinctively that whatever she was about to reveal, it would change everything. It would challenge the carefully constructed world he inhabited, the image he projected, the very foundation of his presidency. He looked at her, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and an undeniable, desperate hope. "Then tell me," he urged, his voice earnest, pleading. "Tell me everything." She turned to face him, her eyes filled with a profound sadness, a deep-seated vulnerability that tore at his heart. He saw the strength in her, the courage that had brought her to this moment, to this place. He waited, breath held, ready to receive whatever truth she offered. But she didn't. Not yet. The words, whatever they were, remained unspoken, locked behind her beautiful, enigmatic eyes. The moment passed, the fragile intimacy shattered by the weight of her unspoken secret. The White House, once a place of quiet connection, now felt like a ticking clock, counting down to an inevitable revelation. The jasmine still scented the air, but now it carried a hint of foreboding, a whisper of the storm that was gathering on the horizon. The White House is a living, breathing entity, and like any organism, it has its own nervous system. Rumors, like a virus, can spread through its intricate network with alarming speed, infecting every corner, from the most secure offices to the bustling staff kitchens. After the Rose Garden encounter, the whispers began. It started subtly, a raised eyebrow here, a knowing glance there. Staff members, ever attuned to the slightest deviation from the norm, noticed the president's increased presence in the East Wing, the way Valentina Reyes was sometimes seen leaving the First Lady's quarters later than usual, occasionally with a Secret Service agent discreetly trailing her. A junior aide, working late in a nearby office, overheard a hushed conversation between the president and Valentina, their voices low, intimate, carrying a warmth that was distinctly unpresidential. The aide, young and ambitious, knew a secret when she heard one, and in Washington secrets were currency. The information, like a carefully passed baton, made its way through the intricate channels of White House gossip. It landed eventually on the desk of Eleanor Vance, First Lady Diana Calloway's chief of staff. Eleanor, a woman whose loyalty to Diana was absolute, had already been digging into Valentina's background. The whispers, combined with the preliminary findings of her investigation, confirmed Diana's suspicions. The president, the man of duty, the symbol of American values, was treading on dangerous ground. Eleanor, however, was not one to act rashly. She understood the delicate balance of power, the need for precision. She knew exactly who would benefit most from this information and how to deliver it for maximum impact. Senator Harold Briggs. Briggs, a formidable political rival of President Calloway, was a man who smelled blood in the water. A conservative firebrand, he had long sought to undermine Calloway's moderate Republican stance, viewing him as too soft, too compromising. Briggs was a master of political maneuvering, a man who understood that in Washington perception was reality, and scandal was a potent weapon. Eleanor made a discreet call, not directly to Briggs, but to one of his most trusted aides, a former colleague from her days on Capitol Hill. The conversation was brief, coded, filled with plausible deniability. "I've come across some interesting information regarding a certain new staff member in the East Wing," Eleanor hinted, her voice carefully neutral. "A rather unconventional background, and it seems to have caught the president's eye." The aide, equally astute, understood immediately. He knew Eleanor wouldn't be calling without a purpose. He knew the implications. He relayed the message to Senator Briggs. Briggs, sitting in his opulent Senate office, listened intently. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. He had been looking for a weakness, a chink in Calloway's armor, something to derail his re-election campaign. And now, it seemed, he had found it. A forbidden romance, a secret identity, the potential for a scandal that would not only destroy Calloway's presidency, but also solidify Briggs's own position as the moral arbiter of the party. The political machinery began to whir into motion. Phone calls were made, hushed conversations held in dimly lit restaurants, closed-door meetings convened in anonymous Capitol Hill offices. Operatives were dispatched, not to confirm the romance, but to dig deeper into Valentina's past, to unearth every detail, every vulnerability. The goal was not just to expose, but to weaponize. Around Valentina and James, the danger grew, unseen but palpable. The White House, once a sanctuary of their burgeoning connection, was now a labyrinth of political traps. The whispers in the West Wing were no longer just gossip. They were the prelude to a storm, a carefully orchestrated political attack designed to tear down everything James Calloway stood for, and to expose Valentina Reyes to the harsh, unforgiving glare of public scrutiny. The clock was ticking, and the fuse had been lit. The bomb dropped on a Tuesday morning, not a physical explosion but a digital one, reverberating through every screen, every news outlet, every social media feed across the nation. Senator Harold Briggs, with a calculated precision that spoke volumes of his political acumen, leaked Valentina Reyes's story to the press. The headline, splashed across the front page of a prominent national newspaper and immediately amplified by online news portals, was designed for maximum impact. White House shocker. President's new love interest is transgender woman with mysterious past. The news broke like a tsunami. Social media exploded, a chaotic maelstrom of outrage, support, bigotry, and fascination. Hashtags trended within minutes, dividing the nation into fervent camps. Cable news channels immediately went into wall-to-wall coverage, their talking heads dissecting every angle, every implication. Pundits debated the moral fabric of the nation, the sanctity of the presidency, and the very definition of identity. Outside the White House gates, the scene was equally tumultuous. Protesters gathered, their numbers swelling by the hour. Some held signs in vibrant colors, proclaiming love is love and Valentina for visibility, advocating for acceptance and the right to love. Others, fueled by a different kind of fervor, waved banners denouncing moral decay and un-American values, their voices raised in angry chants. The iconic fence of the White House, usually a symbol of security, now became a stark dividing line in a deeply polarized nation. President James Calloway watched the coverage from the quiet solitude of the Oval Office. The large television screen, usually displaying market reports or international news, now showed his face, juxtaposed with grainy photos of Valentina, her identity laid bare for the world to scrutinize. He was alone, the weight of the world pressing down on him. His internal war, which had simmered beneath the surface for weeks, now erupted into a full-blown battle. His chief of staff, a man whose loyalty was to the office and the party above all else, burst into the room, his face pale with urgency. "Mr. President," he began, his voice strained, "we need a statement, now. A strong, unequivocal denial. You must distance yourself from her immediately. This is a political catastrophe. It's destroying your approval ratings, tearing the party apart." James didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the screen, on Valentina's image, now a symbol of both his deepest desires and his greatest political vulnerability. He saw the fury in the eyes of the protesters, the judgment in the voices of the commentators. He heard the demands of his team, his party, his First Lady. They wanted him to deny, to disavow, to erase the connection that had brought an unexpected light into his life. But how could he? How could he deny the woman who had seen him, truly seen him for the first time in years? How could he disavow the connection that had made him feel alive again? His duty, his oath, his carefully constructed image, all demanded one course of action. His heart, his soul, the very essence of the man he was becoming, demanded another. He felt the crushing weight of the presidency, the immense responsibility to a nation that now looked to him for answers, for reassurance, for a return to order. But he also felt the profound, undeniable pull of a human connection, a love that had blossomed in the most unlikely of places. The Oval Office, usually a sanctuary of power, now felt like a battlefield. James Calloway was caught between the demands of his office and the truth of his heart, between the political expediency of a lie and the profound personal cost of denying the woman he had come to care for so deeply. The leak had not just exposed Valentina's secret, it had exposed his own, and the nation, holding its breath, waited to see which path its president would choose. The hours following the leak were a blur of frantic activity within the White House. The crisis management team, a phalanx of seasoned political strategists, descended upon the president. They drafted statements, rehearsed talking points, and meticulously planned every word, every gesture for the inevitable press conference. Their message was clear, unequivocal: deny, deflect, distance. The president, they insisted, must reaffirm his commitment to traditional values, to the sanctity of his office, and to the First Lady. James sat through the meetings, a silent, brooding presence. His speechwriters had crafted a cold, calculated statement, a masterpiece of political damage control. It was designed to be antiseptic, to erase any hint of personal connection, to reassert the president's unwavering focus on the nation's business. He practiced the speech in the mirror of his private study, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. My focus remains solely on the American people, these baseless rumors, a distraction from the important work. Each phrase felt like a betrayal, a lie not just to Valentina, but to himself. His team, his party, Diana, all pushed him relentlessly toward this path of denial. Diana, her face a mask of icy composure, had made it clear. His political survival, and by extension hers, depended on this. "You will read the statement, James," she had said, her voice devoid of warmth, "and you will put an end to this charade, for the good of the country." Meanwhile, the object of this national firestorm, Valentina Reyes, was being quietly escorted out of the White House. The decision had been made by the First Lady's office, approved by the Chief of Staff, and presented to James as a necessary measure for security and decorum. There was no official dismissal, no public spectacle, just a quiet, efficient removal. As she walked through the familiar corridors of the East Wing, her small bag clutched in her hand, Valentina's face was unreadable. The Secret Service agents, usually a comforting presence, now felt like silent escorts to an exile. She passed the very spot where she had first met James's gaze, the rose garden, where they had shared a moment of fragile intimacy. Each step was heavy with the weight of what had transpired and what was yet to come. She reached the gates, the cacophony of the protesters a distant roar. The black SUV waited, its engine idling. As she prepared to step inside, she paused. She turned, her eyes sweeping over the iconic facade of the White House, the grand columns, the stately windows, the flag fluttering proudly against the stormy sky. It was a symbol of power, of history, of a nation's ideals, and it was the place where she had dared to be seen, to be loved, to be herself. And then a small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It wasn't a smile of defeat or of sadness or even of resignation. It was a smile of profound, quiet triumph. A smile that held a secret of its own. A smile that spoke of courage, of defiance, of an inner strength that no political scandal, no public outrage could ever diminish. She stepped into the SUV, the door closing softly behind her, severing her physical connection to the White House. But her image, her story, Her very presence remained a ghost in the machine, a challenge to the man who was about to face the nation. James Calloway stood before the podium, the seal of the President of the United States emblazoned before him. The lights of the cameras were blinding, the murmurs of the press corps a restless tide. He held the prepared statement in his hand, the words a heavy burden. His heart pounded, a drumbeat against the silence of his internal struggle. The storm was here, and he was about to step into its eye. The nation waited, and so did Valentina, wherever she was, her quiet smile, a powerful, unspoken challenge. The true depth of Valentina Reyes's strength, the quiet defiance behind her enigmatic smile, was a secret even James Calloway didn't know. The leak, the scandal, the public outcry, none of it had come as a surprise to her. In fact, Valentina had been warned. 3 weeks before Senator Briggs unleashed his political weapon, a discreet, anonymous message had reached her. A source, deep within the senator's own office, a person disillusioned by the ruthless machinations of Washington, had tipped her off. She had a choice then. She could have disappeared quietly, slipped away from the White House, vanished from the public eye before the storm broke. She could have protected herself, preserved her privacy, avoided the inevitable onslaught of judgment and scrutiny. It would have been the logical, self-preserving choice. But Valentina Reyes had never taken the easy path. She had fought for every inch of her existence, for every right to be who she was. She had left her home in Bogotá, crossed borders, navigated new cultures, all to build a life that was truly her own, to be seen, to be authentic. And in the White House, in the most unlikely of places, she had found a connection that had allowed her to feel more fully herself than ever before. She chose to stay, not for James, not for a fairy tale romance, but for herself. For every version of herself she had buried to survive, for every moment she had hidden her truth. She stayed because to run would have been to deny her own journey, to invalidate the courage it had taken to stand in her truth. She stayed because she knew that sometimes the most powerful act of defiance is simply to exist, openly and without apology. Before she was escorted out of the White House, in the quiet hours before the full force of the scandal hit, Valentina wrote James a letter. It was not a plea nor an accusation. It was a testament, the emotional heart of the entire story penned with a steady hand, imbued with the profound wisdom of a woman who understood the true cost of identity. My dearest James, if you are reading this, then the storm has broken, and you are standing in its eye. I knew it was coming. I was warned. I could have left, but I chose not to. And I want you to understand why. When I first came to this house, I saw a man, not a president, a man carrying a profound loneliness, much like my own. You saw me, not as a label, not as a political statement, but as Valentina. And in this place, where everyone wears a mask, that was a gift beyond measure. My journey, James, has been one of constant becoming, of shedding skins, of finding my true reflection in a world that often tried to tell me I was invisible, or worse, wrong. To be a woman, to be Colombian, to be transgender, these are not burdens, but the very fabric of who I am. They are my strength, my history, my truth. The world will try to define me now, to reduce me to a headline, a scandal. They will try to make my identity a weapon against you, but my identity is not a weapon. It is my dignity, and I will not hide it, not for anyone, not for any office. You asked me once to tell you my secrets. This is my greatest one. I am not afraid to be seen, not anymore. And I hope, with all my heart, that you too will find the courage to be seen, truly seen, not just as the president, but as the man who found a flicker of light in the darkest corners of this house. Do not let them make you deny the truth of who you are, or the truth of what we shared. Do not let them make you small. The greatest power, James, is not in the office you hold, but in the integrity you carry within your soul. I do not ask you to fight for me. I ask you to fight for truth, for the right of every person to live with dignity, to love without fear, and to be seen for who they truly are. The colors I use in my work, they are not just pigments. They are stories, they are light and shadow, they are the spectrum of human experience. Do not let them paint your world in only black and white. Be brave, James. Be true. With deepest respect and an enduring hope, Valentina. The letter, a profound declaration of self, a challenge wrapped in grace, was now in James Calloway's hands. It was more than words on a page. It was a mirror, reflecting not just Valentina's truth, but his own. And in the quiet of the Oval Office, as the nation clamored for his response, James Calloway was about to face the most defining moment of his presidency and of his life. The Oval Office, usually a hive of activity, was eerily silent. It was 3 a.m. The city outside slept, oblivious to the profound internal battle raging within its most powerful resident. President James Calloway sat at his desk, the weight of Valentina's letter heavy in his hands. He had read it countless times, each word searing itself into his consciousness. He did not sleep. The words, "Be brave, James. Be true," echoed in the cavern of his mind, a relentless drumbeat against the political expediency his team demanded. By morning, the decision was made. It was not the decision his chief of staff expected. It was not the decision his party demanded. It was not the decision that would guarantee his political survival. It was his decision. He called a press conference. Not the one his team had meticulously prepared, filled with carefully worded denials and deflections. This was different. This was raw. This was James Calloway, the man, not just the president. He walked to the podium, the presidential seal gleaming before him. The room was packed, a sea of flashing cameras and expectant faces. The air crackled with anticipation. The nation, still reeling from the leak, was glued to their screens, waiting for their president to address the scandal, to put it to rest, to reaffirm the values they believed he represented. He stood tall, his gaze sweeping across the room. He did not carry a prepared statement. His hands were empty. His voice, when it came, was steady, imbued with a quiet authority that transcended the usual political rhetoric. "My fellow Americans," he began, his voice resonating with a newfound conviction. "I stand before you today not to address rumors, nor to engage in political theater. I stand before you to speak about something far more fundamental, about human dignity, about the cost of hiding who we are, and about the kind of America I believe we must strive to be." He paused, letting his words sink in. "This office, this presidency, demands a great deal. It demands sacrifice, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to the people. But it also demands integrity. And sometimes integrity means speaking a truth that is uncomfortable, a truth that challenges our preconceived notions, a truth that asks us to look beyond the headlines and into the heart of what it means to be human." His eyes, usually guarded, now held a profound sincerity. "We live in a nation that champions freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what does that truly mean if we cannot be free to be ourselves? If we cannot pursue happiness with those we choose to love? If we cannot live with the dignity that is the birthright of every single American?" He did not confirm or deny a romance. He did not mention Valentina by name, but his message was clear, unmistakable. "I believe in an America where every individual, regardless of their background, their identity, or their journey, is treated with respect. Where empathy triumphs over prejudice, where courage to be authentic is celebrated, not condemned, and where the pursuit of truth in all its forms is paramount." He concluded, his voice ringing with a quiet power. "I understand that my words today may divide, they may challenge, but I believe with every fiber of my being that the strength of our nation lies not in uniformity, but in the rich tapestry of our diversity. It lies in our capacity for understanding, for compassion, and for the unwavering belief that every life has value, every story deserves to be heard, and every heart deserves to be free. The speech ended. The room erupted, a cacophony of shouts and questions. But James Calloway stood firm, his gaze unwavering. He had delivered a speech that would forever be etched into the annals of presidential history. It was a speech that divided the nation, sparking furious debate and passionate support. It was a speech that cost him dearly in the political arena, but it was also a speech that united something profound within him. He had chosen truth over image, integrity over power. And in doing so, he had, for the first time in a very long time, truly found himself. The president had made his choice, and the world would never be the same. 6 months later, the political landscape had shifted dramatically. President James Calloway, true to the convictions he had so powerfully articulated, did not seek re-election. The decision, though met with both relief and outrage across the country, was his alone. He left the White House not with a sense of defeat, but with a quiet dignity, a man who had chosen a different kind of legacy. He had traded the immense power of the presidency for the profound power of personal truth. Valentina Reyes, after the initial storm had passed, returned to Colombia briefly. She reconnected with her roots, found solace in the familiar rhythms of Bogotá, and drew strength from her family. But America, the country where she had found her voice, still called to her. She returned not to Washington, D.C., but to the vibrant, artistic heart of New York City. There she opened her own studio, a sanctuary of creativity where she could practice her art, not for the First Lady, but for herself, for her clients, for the sheer joy of transformation. Her story, once a scandal, had become an inspiration for many, a testament to resilience and authenticity. They were not together, James and Valentina. The chasm between their worlds, the immense public scrutiny, the sheer impossibility of a conventional relationship remained. But they were not strangers either. The bond forged in the quiet corners of the White House, the understanding shared between two souls who had dared to be vulnerable, was an enduring one. One crisp autumn afternoon, in a bustling, sun-drenched street in Soho, New York, a man walked into Valentina's studio. He was dressed simply, in a plain dark jacket and jeans, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap. There was no security detail, no motorcade, no fanfare, just a man walking in from the street. Valentina was at her station, meticulously blending colors on a palette, her back to the door. She saw him in the large mirror that dominated the studio wall. Her hand, which had been moving with practiced precision, paused for a fraction of a second. Her eyes, meeting his reflection, held no surprise, no shock, only a deep, quiet recognition. He stood there, just inside the door, a faint, almost shy smile on his lips. He didn't speak. She didn't speak. The bustling sounds of the city outside seemed to fade, replaced by the soft hum of the studio, the gentle rustle of her brushes. She slowly, deliberately, picked up a clean brush. She dipped it into a vibrant, earthy tone, then turned, not to him, but to the empty chair in front of her station. He understood. He walked over, took off his cap, and sat down in the chair. And for the first time in years, for both of them, neither was performing. There was no audience, no political agenda, no public image to uphold. Just two people in a quiet room, ready to create something real, something true. The president, now just James, had found a different kind of power. And Valentina, the artist, was ready to paint a new chapter, not just for him, but for herself, in the vibrant, unmasked colors of truth. And that, my friends, is the powerful, unforgettable story of The Color of Secrets. A tale that reminds us that true strength often lies not in power, but in authenticity. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please give this video a big thumbs up, and we'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments below and let us know what you thought of James and Valentina's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories that challenge, inspire, and entertain. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.